Good day, everyone. You are listening to the podcast of Studio Central and Eastern Europe at KU Leuven. In our 20-minute episodes, we explore the latest academic research on the region. I am Maryna Shevtsova. I am FWO postdoctoral researcher at Lions KU Leuven.
And I'm Jonas Vanderschueren. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Cultural Studies specializing in Central and Eastern Europe.
And we should warn you that this won't be our typical episode because today is May 19th and we are just 2 days after the epic Eurovision grand finale that took place in Basel. And oh my god, what a finale, and then what a voting was it. Jonas, have you watched?
I have very much watched, and I also don't have any nails anymore from all the nail biting. It was really, really tense, to be perfectly honest. The voting in general was just so all over the place. The dynamics between the jury vote and the public vote were just completely different, or at least not as homogeneous as you would usually expect. I mean, I had a quick look at the voting records, and basically there's only 2 countries that have some agreement between the jury and the public, which was Germany, surprisingly, with the public giving 74 and the jury 77, and Luxembourg as well, with 24 from the public and 23 from the jury, which is of course very, very low. But then with other countries, it's kind of, all over the place. I don't know, did that strike you as well as just surprising?
Yes, absolutely. I think for me it was one of the most tense jury voting process. I really didn't know what to expect. And one thing that also surprised me a lot, I felt like there was no neighbor supporting anymore in this voting. So, for example, Sweden, a Swedish band, they were favorites this year. And I expected Finland and Norway gave them 12, and it didn't happen. I think it's only Iceland that remained loyal. Similarly with Ukraine, usually we used to exchange 12 points of jury votes with Poland and Czech Republic, but again, no. So I wonder what has changed. You know, Eurovision was always actually blamed for this voting for neighboring countries. And when Belgium didn't make it to the final, one of the comments that I heard quite several times in Flanders was that, this is because we usually don't get the support votes from our neighboring countries, or neighboring countries actually were not in the same semi-final with us. But, well, it seems that it doesn't work anymore. Huh?
No, I would agree with you, is that it seems that those patterns from, especially the 2000s, I feel most people looking back on that era of Eurovision, at least in Western Europe, very much think of an Eastern European voting bloc. Was that justified? Not really, but at least in public perceptions, that was something that was very much alive and a very common complaint. I feel today that's almost completely broken down. I think the only consistency we can really see is that if we would have to say it's more based on cultural similarity, in the sense that I feel that France still attracts a lot of votes, both from juries and from the public from other regions in Europe that are either French-speaking or more Francophile leaning, in their cultural specificities. But really, nation-states voting for each other, I don't really see that in this Eurovision, except maybe for the exception of Azerbaijan, where the fact that it gave 12 points to Israel, I found very unsurprising, to be honest. Of course, for geopolitical reasons and also for things we will get into a little bit later in the podcast, I presume. If you don't mind me making a small comment about what you said about Belgium, is that I think in Belgium there is this very interesting dichotomy where on the one hand, at least I speak now from a position as a Dutch-speaking Belgian, Eurovision is very often dismissed as the Gay Olympics, as a camp event, as an event that's culturally insignificant and primarily a festival of kitsch. But then when we do participate, we always are very surprised when our quote-unquote real authentic music doesn't actually make it or doesn't actually score highly. And I diverge quite substantially from the public opinion in Flanders and in Belgium right now, is that I was not surprised at all that Red Sebastian did not get this far. Before we came on air, we discussed the Spotify streaming numbers and Red Sebastian only being number 24th. Also, none of the people that I know, I have a quite international friend group and also a lot of international colleagues, and not a single person who is interested in Eurovision brought up Red Sebastian except to say that they're really surprised by how intense Flemish people were about Red Sebastian. So I think, how to put it, this is not really academic language, but people were quite salty here in Flanders about that result, but I don't think it's that surprising, to be honest.
Yeah, it was so interesting for me now that after a couple of years in Belgium I started reading in Dutch. It was a guilty pleasure for me to read all the comments and the discussions about how come that our amazing Seppe didn't make it to the grand finale. But another topic that was of course coming up all the time is whether the voting system is fair, because for semi-finals we now have only televoting. Indeed, jury and public clearly have, for some songs, very different preferences. And I think this is already a common trend that jury always gives high scores for entries with very strong vocals, like, for example, Austria or, I guess, Switzerland. But then it seems that public often likes something funnier and lighter, and Estonia scored really high this year, getting 258 points from public, and it's only 98 from jury. So this is something that also felt this year, that with all sadness and grievances in the world, public is kind of longing for something light and some jokes and something less political. Mm-hmm. And yet, of course, we can't speak about our Eurovision without politics. So looking at our number 2 in the score table, how do you feel about it? How was it for you on Saturday?
I'll be very honest, I was very relieved that Israel did not win this Eurovision Song Contest. There are many reasons, and I'm glad that you bring them up. The main one is a very obvious one, is that Israel is currently accused of committing a genocide in Gaza. The way that both Israel has been politicizing its participation in the Eurovision Song Contest through, for example, publicly, this is all in the open, financing advertisements on social media and on YouTube and so forth to vote for Israel and the Israeli candidate, but also through the selection of the specific candidate that they actually sent this year, actually a survivor of October 7th. I think we can all have some form of sympathy for someone who survives a terrorist attack, right? But that's a very clear political choice that I cannot help but just see as a massive middle finger to anyone who is worried and anyone who finds this highly inappropriate. Add to that also just the fact that the defense of the EBU is that when it comes to Israel is that it maintains broadcasters that are independent of their governments. I think that's untenable in the case of Israel. I do not believe you can say that is the case right now with Kan, if I pronounce it correctly, the successor to the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, and its relationship to the Israeli government is that it clearly sees this stage as a very important space to commit both pinkwashing of Israel's reputation. It also clearly sees it as an important cultural space in terms of maintaining its cultural ties with Western Europe. Because, of course, the fact that it is participating on the Eurovision stage sends a significant political message through culture. It's just after both the Spanish broadcaster RTVE and the Flemish broadcaster VRT have issued statements asking for Israel's participation to be questioned. In fact, Spain going even further and calling for Israel's dismission outright. It only seems fair, especially what has happened with Russia and Belarus, which were rightfully kicked out of Eurovision. It's only fair that we apply that same standard to Israel, especially given the way that the stage is being politicized right now. And to come back to the question you just asked me, I literally texted and received messages from so many people, and we all agree that if Israel won, that's most likely the end of the Eurovision Song Contest. I cannot imagine either watching or attending. I think many broadcasters would withdraw. Is that really the hill that the EBU wants to die on? I feel is a fair question to ask. I don't know what your views are on this. I'd be very curious to hear what your thoughts are.
No, I do share your opinion. You know, of course, the political talk show, the Afspraak on VRT, and one of the participants, I think it was on Friday, she's a minister, and she said that she cannot, of course, influence the politics of VRT, but if they decided not to show Israeli entry and maybe instead show a short video by Oxfam or somebody else on Gaza, she wouldn't judge them. And I really liked this suggestion. VRT didn't dare to do this time, but I'm happy that they made a statement. But while you were speaking about the promotion that Israel paid for online and also how I felt when the vote was announced, I first thought, well, maybe we should mobilize people to vote more, because there was mobilization to vote for Israel, and to send another message would be, one solution would be to vote. But then I thought, well, actually, voting costs money, and one vote is 75 cents, so it adds up, which means that to make a statement, you have to spend money to basically benefit not maybe the cause that you want, support in terms of commercial TV, redistribution of resources. And it actually then flows into my next question about affordability and inclusivity of Eurovision. I was just thinking that one of the reasons why I supported, I would be happier if Estonia won, or Latvia or Lithuania, would be that I would maybe have a chance to go and attend Eurovision, because it becomes so more expensive lately. And when you think Switzerland, before Sweden, Denmark, now Austria, this is something that a woman, a postdoc can only dream of, and not to mention all the other people. Well, the song festival actually portrays itself as the space for inclusivity and diversity.
No, I fully agree. And I feel this works both on the individual level of someone who actually wants to see the ESC, but also on the participants. Most broadcasters don't even pay a fee to the actual musicians who perform, which I understand because it's a competition. However, you're still representing a nation state and a broadcaster on that stage. So to me, it feels a little bit off that that's the situation. But also for just the fees that are being charged to national broadcasters are completely unaffordable and pricing out a significant number of Central and Eastern European countries now. If in the 1990s and the 2000s, entry into Eurovision was one of the easier ways to become part of Europe, it's now working in reverse. If I remember correctly, Bosnia-Herzegovina has withdrawn, Bulgaria has withdrawn. Until this year, Montenegro also had withdrawn, but they're back now. Moldova as well, you mentioned before we went on air. It's very difficult to actually find accurate figures that broadcasters need to pay because they don't like communicating about this. But for example, the most recent figures I could find for Spain, one of the main funders, which is also why they are driving that conversation about Israel, is 640,000 euros. Just as a fee to the EBU, then we're not even talking about organizing and hosting the actual show, right? So I think that cost, which has gotten, to be frank, quite extravagant, and the shows reflect this, is that they are really bombastic, and you can tell that the production values are quite high, doesn't necessarily, I think, reflect its own stated motto of United by Music. If at least half of a continent, and we need to be honest, I think you need to be already a quite high-earning individual if you want to go, let's say, with a family, or if you want to go with a friend group, right? Or you want to go with a chosen family, right? To go and see the ESC, we're talking about a trip that will be 1,000 plus euros, most likely. Which I agree, even us as postdocs, seems quite out of reach, becomes far more difficult when you think about the average wage in Ukraine or Poland or Romania, right?
No, absolutely. Yes, and so I wonder whether actually something that is supposed to unite becomes more divisive. I just read that this year they also made another rule that you cannot bring any other flag to the stage than yours, which again I find problematic. Yeah, I remember there was this limitation for not saying anything political when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, and there was the whole debate when our team who won with Stefania Kalush Orchestra. They said something about freeing people from Azovstal, and now basically they shut the mouth to anyone who wants to support Palestine. Clearly,
I fully agree, and I think it's also very problematic, and this ties directly into what you just said, both about Ukraine and about Israel. Is that it's really problematic the way in which the EBU, whenever it finds it convenient, will use the queer community really as a form of pinkwashing of the festival. I think this was also applying to Georgia, by the way. The Georgian entry, which didn't make it to the final, but which was featured in the semi-finals, which was very explicitly pro-government and also quite homophobic, if I remember correctly. yeah, that gets a platform. But then pro-Palestinian, even just like something very subtle, like last year was possible, people painting their fingernails in the colors of the Palestinian flag, even that is now banned. And to bring it back to the queer community, is that they've of course extended that ban of flags also to queer flags, because apparently being queer is also a political identity in the opinion of the EBU, which they equate to being a member of a nation state, which is, of course, on many, many levels incredibly problematic, and does show the character of Eurovision as it is today understood by the EBU. So I will return in a moment to you and ask for your opinions. But I do really feel that the way that it's currently using it, clearly the national broadcasters who are participating in the EBU will have to put it under pressure, because that's also how Russia got banned and Belarus got banned, was through pressure from other national broadcasters. Now we see that push against Israel as well from some national broadcasters, because the EBU clearly doesn't want to listen to other forms of public pressure.
I feel now really sorry that we only have around 20 minutes, because it provokes so many questions inside my head. Does it all make Eurovision in a way more homonationalist? But I wouldn't say, we take this classic idea of homonationalism as presenting one nation or nation state and ethnicity within is more progressive as compared to another country, because this one is more LGBTQ friendly and also more oriented towards gender equality and so on. Here you have this mixture of nationalism, queer friendliness, but then it's also this, I wouldn't call it anymore that queer inclusive in terms of, right? A lot of people who would identify as queer or part of LGBTQ community are actually in very precarious situations. So this is very elitist form of entertainment to go and party in Basel. And then you still have Eurovision in a way embedded into this whole debate in the region, with Russia now happily out saying that, of course, this is a competition for those gays, while we here with our traditional values will have another form of concert with very traditional gender roles and all very Christian and Orthodox. And though I'm sure that if they were given the stage, they would have immediately sent someone. It's so multi-layered. But do you think there is still a chance for a better Eurovision?
Well, first of all, I fully agree with everything you just said about it not necessarily being traditionally homo-nationalist, but very much, both in its structure and in its messaging, being very focused on a universalization of the nuclear family and an erasure of queer identities that do not fit the gender binary. One thing that really sticks with me also in this context of the ban on queer flags is that back in 2014, when Conchita Wurst won, the EBU and the Eurovision was very proud to show, look, we're so progressive, and that then prompted, for example, Hungary to leave. I think Turkey also left in the wake of Conchita Wurst winning. But now, as a direct effect of Eurovision banning queer flags, it's also impossible to show solidarity with trans people who are currently undergoing, I would agree with those scholars, are calling a trans genocide in the US, and also the beginnings of that in the UK, and just in general are very much being targeted right now by right-wing politics. Of course, you'd ask me a different question, specifically whether there is a future for Eurovision. And I do believe there is a future for Eurovision. I think it's been enduring now for 69 years. Next year will be 70 years. I think there very much is an appetite for this festival. Even in its dark ages, in between brackets of the late 90s, it very much managed to pull through. And I just think that we're at another turning point in which there'll need to be very significant reforms to the way that the contest is held. I personally would actually be very interested to see if there is a way to not have it just be nation states competing against each other, let's say languages or culture groups or whatever. That's, of course, a very loose idea. Please don't criticize me for the obvious issues with that that come out of it. But you understand what I'm trying to get at. I think the main point is that there will need to be big changes, because otherwise I don't think it can continue. I don't know if you feel the same way or how you think it could change.
I do feel like if it continues the way it does, then it's not the Eurovision we love and appreciate anymore. And strong fan base, I think, is calling for changes. And also we want Eurovision to embrace different set of values than they do now. Moroccan oil is the main sponsor, and let's stick to that. Including, for example, the issue with these 5 founding countries that are always there. I understand the idea. They were the founders and they give money. But I feel like it is unfair for them always to be in the finals. It ruins a bit the competition. Now they also got the right to show their songs in semifinals, but they are automatically in. Also, as I said, the amount of money that each country can invest into the preparation. With all my sincerity, I love Sweden, I love Swedish entries. But nobody can afford, to invest as much as Sweden does into this industry. So I wonder if there is more space for more equal chances and opportunities. A fun fact, for example, Ruslana, who was our first winner on Eurovision in 2004, she was telling afterwards that she had to put her flat to remortgage and to sell some things and took a lot of loans in order to be able to travel and to promote the song and to buy these costumes that were actually handmade. So all these speculations that, Ukraine spent a lot on it. No, she basically was all in debt. And I don't think that she ever became a very rich performer because she really invests everything in her performances. But I don't think this is how it should be. I don't think that each performer from Lithuania or Latvia should sell their flats to be able to compete.
No, of course. Yeah, I fully agree on that. It's that's absolutely insane that was even a necessity, because this is back in 2004, right? Can imagine that while things, I would hope, have changed a little in the intervening 20 years, I can imagine that dynamic is still very much present, because I think those East-West inequalities have not really fundamentally changed. If they would decide to keep founding members for whatever reason, they should at least include one or two countries from Central and Eastern Europe. A logic one would actually be Ukraine, because Ukraine has won so many times, is known as being a very successful Eurovision country. It's same with Sweden, actually. I don't see why you would not redistribute it to be a little bit more equal. We're on this podcast, I presume, very biased towards Central and Eastern Europe, but I think still the way as it currently stands, I think cannot really hold. Would you mind if I asked you a question as the final question of this podcast?
Of course.
I just wanted to ask if you want to share this, of course, with the audience. Did you vote in the final?
I voted in the final. So I sent 5 votes for Sweden, 5 votes for Ukraine, and then 2 votes for Iceland. And I think Iceland was one of my biggest disappointments in how a jury voted this year. I really loved those 2 guys. They were so charismatic and fun. I can't believe that they're second from the end. And what about you?
Oh, so you're actually one of the public votes for Iceland. That's actually, thank you for identifying yourself. Yes, I did vote, actually. For me, it's the first time that I actually did televoting. I voted 3 times for Poland, 3 times for Estonia, and also, I need to think for a moment. No, I also voted for the Netherlands because I actually quite enjoyed Claude's entry.
Oh yeah, he was quite good, that's true. But I didn't want to support him because I really liked Iceland and I didn't want to take attention from Iceland.
Well, at the end of the day, it's still a competition, right? So at least we can still root for the countries that we enjoy the most. Thank you for sharing this and for inviting me on.
Yes, thank you so much. And let's hope, next year we probably don't go to Austria, but maybe we can go to Poland in 2027. You never know.
Yeah, let's hope. Or let's hope that Russia finally ends its invasion and we can do this in Kiev.
Oh yeah, that would be lovely. And thank you, dear listeners, for being with us and sharing this audio space with us.